snow yet here.
Yeah, we had snow early in the season, but it's now back to its usual scheduled programming, gray and rainy, which we will have for a while. Welcome everybody. Solid Ground live stream, January 23rd. It's 1/23/23 today. Kind of a cool day.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Jody, you want to introduce Solid Ground for us?
Yes, I do want to introduce Solid Ground. So Solid Ground is a peer support community for anyone concerned about the imposition of critical social justice, that's woke, and or COVID mandates in their workplace, university, school, or community. We offer weekly online peer support groups in which members share ideas, thoughts, and support for how to navigate the impact of these ideologies and answer the question, where do we go from here? You can join one of our groups for only $5 a month. To find out how to join, please visit our website at solidgroundsupport.com. And I want to make a special note here that Solid Ground does not provide psychotherapy or legal advice, and nothing we do should be construed as such.
Very good. Thank you. And we are, well, I don't know if we've ever done, did we do a round of introductions the first time we did one of these?
No, and we should, right?
Yeah, I think maybe so.
Oh, maybe we did the first time, but I feel like we should do it.
Do a little intro and a check-in every time. Yeah. Right. Well, who wants to start? Okay, I'll start. I'm Leslie, and I live in the Pacific Northwest. I'm from Texas originally. I have 4 children. My background is I worked as a photographer for many years and in the medical field, and decided to go into counseling as a career change for myself, and found that to be fraught with a lot more complexity than I thought it was going to be. So I came across the so-called woke ideology in a big way, and I've been spending a lot of time talking about that lately because it became a stumbling block in my education. And now I work as a coach, and yep, that's what I do. Nice to nice to see everyone.
I'll go next. Because I'm next on my screen. My name's Jody Shaw, and I am also a mother. I have 2 sons. I live in Western Massachusetts, home to Smith College. I am a musician and became a librarian really to support myself and have better hours than a musician does when I had my children. And that is how I lived in New York City for many years, and I moved up here to Western Massachusetts and ended up working at Smith College, where I came face to face with critical social justice and the woke issue. And at Smith, finally, after a few years, a line was crossed and I had to speak up, and I became what I now refer to as a whistleblower. And I refer to Leslie as a whistleblower as well. And Jen, you too. And so now I am navigating life after the whistle fades. And I have a federal lawsuit that I filed against Smith College. It's Shaw v. Smith College, and it's filed in the district court for Massachusetts. And that's what I'm doing. It's Jody Shaw.
I'll go next. I'm Jennifer Friend. I live just outside Washington, D.C., and I grew up in the area. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in private practice, and I got into this community of thoughtful dissidents because I was a Fairfax County employee, and I became a whistleblower about the imposition of critical race theory in the workplace there.
And you have the best name for a counselor or social worker.
Her stage name, it's a real name.
It's a real name.
Right. Well, I'm David. Thanks for joining, everybody. I am a trainee clinical psychologist in the UK, England, and I encountered critical social justice probably about 2 years ago, just before I started the course. Not just on the course, but also in the NHS where I was working. I found I wasn't able to have any of the conversations I really wanted to have about this stuff. And I thought I was going mad. And not only did I not have the conversations, but anytime I brought them up, I felt like I was getting a cold shoulder or being told to go, make noises elsewhere. So I did. And I ended up finding that doing this peer support work and running a group as I have done for the last year and a half, incredibly rewarding for me to be able to talk to like-minded people who share some of my concerns, because I wasn't able to do that in my work at all. And I'm still not, but I have been slowly questioning things, and I guess knowing how important it is to do this group work has helped me to question things. So I'd really like to extend the invitation to people to join these groups, because they really help me.
Yeah, the groups are wonderful. What kind of themes do you all find coming out in your groups?
Oh, well, for me, I mean, the gender stuff is really bothering people, and have some people have been directly impacted by it in a major way. So that, talking about the gender stuff, talking about WPATH, and I've learned a lot, actually, that WPATH is apparently funded by big pharma, a lot of big pharma money. And I'm sorry, I don't know what WPATH stands for. I would say it World something.
Professional Association for Transgender Health.
Right. Thank you, Leslie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and then also people wondering about, I want to say something, this is wrong, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to speak out. I don't know the best way to do it. I don't know where. I don't know when. And I don't know what will happen if I do speak out. So kind of people grappling with that. And that's a process, I think. And then there was one other thing. I forget now, but those two things have come up every single time. Oh, and the COVID mandates, asking about why does solid ground include things about COVID mandates. And we actually had a very civil discussion, because I had somebody in my group last week who we were talking about the vaccines in particular, not necessarily about mandates, but it was a good discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Where people really felt like people could say what they really wanted to say. There was some, I don't know if I would call it disagreement, but not totally in agreement with each other.
Do you find that that's a dividing line among people that have been coming to the group?
It was the first time it came up in my group, but I've noticed this with the gender ideology stuff and the race stuff, because I became concerned about the gender ideology stuff in 2014. And I've always been concerned about it, like right from the beginning. And then when I started at Smith, I didn't understand that the race stuff, for lack of a better word, was under the same umbrella as the gender stuff. And I much to my shame, I went along with the race stuff. I felt like something was wrong, but I didn't quite know what. And I just placed my trust in Smith and thought, okay, I guess this is right. And I didn't see, and I see other people as well. Like sometimes I'll talk to people who are like fighting against this gender authoritarianism, but are totally on board with the woke, the race stuff, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And so I think it takes a while to see that they're under the same umbrella. And it took me a while to see that as well with the COVID stuff, actually. So I kind of think, at risk of sounding like a jerk, like, oh, it's developmental and you will come to see it. It does, to me, it feels very much under the same umbrella of authoritarianism, wrongly imposed in the name of public health. And for woke, it's like, for the greater good, you must sacrifice for the greater good. And it's like the woke stuff, you must sacrifice, you must confess to certain things and identify a certain way for the greater good. It's the same thing with the COVID stuff. You must inject this largely unproven substance into your body for the greater good. Like it's a very similar rhetoric. So I see them as being very similar, but I do see that divide a lot with the COVID and the woke, and also within woke with the gender and the race. It's interesting.
Something they all seem to share is this, that there's an orthodox way of seeing things according to a mainstream narrative, that there are severe social consequences for questioning, where other things can be questioned and we can have dialogue and reasonable people can come to different positions on these issues. We're seeing that treated, they're all treated the same way. There's one way to think, and the main narrative will call you out and call you names. You'll be a racist, you'll be a transphobe, you'll be an anti-vaxxer, you'll be something untouchable if you dare to question these things and try to engage in thoughtful conversation around them. So yeah, I see a lot of similarity.
Yeah, that's interesting, because there have been people who've questioned like even the measles vaccine and the mumps vaccine for a long time. And I can't say they were like, that's part of the mainstream, but they weren't, I don't recall them being punished in this way. So why is this vaccine's like, why is this so fraught?
Yeah, and something that's such a new technology too, to come right out the gate without being able to have a thoughtful discussion. It does have the same kind of flavor as the critical social justice stuff does.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities, I think.
I kind of feel it's got something to do with the fact that you become responsible for harming other people. That feels kind of like the thing that clings on to the vaccine thing, which is that you have a responsibility, otherwise you are going to be harmful to other people. And you hear that about ideas and speech as well, don't you? By even uttering certain things, you are being harmful. So I feel like that's the thing that shuts down. I guess maybe that's just a trend in authoritarianism generally, but it's definitely the guilt complex of putting responsibility on people for harming others.
It's the same collectivism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. It's all it all has that same spirit of authoritarianism. There was a teacher who I think it was in Virginia, who was fired from teaching because he said that he was not going to use the pronouns of a trans child in class, but he said, I will call this person by their chosen name, which is a name opposite to their biological sex. He said, I'll do that, and I just won't use any pronouns. But the school said, no, you must use the pronouns, which is so interesting because it's this insistence on actually controlling what other people think.
And say, right, your speech. Yeah.
What they say, but also what they think, really, because he just won't use any pronouns to refer to the student, but it's like, no, you have to articulate it. And that to me is really chilling.
Yeah, it's a whole nother step, because it's not just saying don't say something that's going to harm and offend someone, or harm, quote, but like that, I'm not going to use the pronouns that would bother this person. I won't do that. I won't say the hurtful thing. That's not good enough. You must go a step further and actually use this language to talk about this person or talk to this person.
Yeah. You can't even abstain, basically. That was the line that was crossed for me at Smith. That was the final, like, when I had to do something, because when I abstained from discussing my race at work at a mandatory meeting, that was when I was told I was, that was a sign of white fragility, and I was humiliated in front of my colleagues. And that's when I realized, holy shit, like, I can't even just be silent. I have to speak the words, and we all know what words those are. It's a script.
Yeah, speaking of words, so that is a really good segue into the thing that I wanted to I was hoping we could talk about today. A couple of weeks ago, Stanford released their, what was it called? Harmful Language Guidelines, Harmful Language Guide. And they have since had to pull this from their website, apparently, because they had such a backlash, which is good. I think that, I mean, I'm glad people are calling this out. But other schools are doing similar things. University of Washington did this last year and released an inclusive language guide for IT, which seeks to problematize a whole host of words based on ableist, racist, gendered language. So the sorts of things that come up on these things are just pretty shocking. So we were talking about that, and I feel like it's straight out of 1984. Like one of the examples from the UW language guide is the word see, S-E-E, which is deemed ableist. And so we're not supposed to use the word see because that could be offensive to people who can't see.
What page is that on, Leslie?
Let's see. It's in the UW guide, and did you find that? You go to itconnect.uw.edu, and then you can go to list of problematic words, and then they have a grid, like a matrix. And so it'll say on the left-hand side, it'll say the problem words.
Mm-hmm.
And then the box next to that has suggested alternatives. And then the next box over gives context, which gives a definition for the term and why it's problematic. So I don't know exactly what page of that grid C is on, but if you scroll down through it, like there's another one, mob programming, which I'm not in computer land, so I don't really understand how this term is used, but mob programming is defined as a software development approach where the whole team works on the same thing at the same time in the same space and on the same computer. And then why it's problematic. The intention was for a general non-hierarchical group of people to self-organize and by accomplishing tasks be dangerous. However, historically, the use of mob has a racial component and has been used derogatorily and in a negative way. You're muted, Jody. Yeah. Silent scream.
I has a racial component. I mean, I have always only ever associated the word mob with a large group of people. And I'm trying to, like, in my mind's eye, have those people been white? Maybe. I mean, I guess maybe that's my white privilege showing. But I've never, what does that mean? I mean, that you could say that any word that has anything to do with people has a racial component, right? Anything. Because,
well, you can construe it that way, yeah, if you want to.
Which Stanford is construing it that way.
Well, this was, and just to be clear, that was from UW. So,
this is okay.
Yeah, I don't have the Stanford list in front of me. I do have it on the screen, but
I have the Stanford one. Yeah, and it doesn't have. I can't do a search on it. It doesn't have mob, and it doesn't have C in it, but it has
As American.
Yeah, has the word American. Yep, it has Philippine Islands in it.
Yeah, that was the one that stood out for me, I thought. And there was no explanation for that whatsoever.
They don't give an explanation, but that's problematic.
It only has, they have, and on their language guide, they have Philippine Islands on the left. That's the problematic term. And then they have consider using instead Philippines or Republic of the Philippines. And the context, the reason why, is that the term is politically incorrect and denotes colonialism. Some people of Filipino heritage might use the term, though. Some people, so what does that mean? Some people of Filipino heritage might use the term Philippine Islands. So the thing about all this stuff is, like, are we checking? Like, first of all, are you asking every single person of Philippine heritage, whatever that means, right? Like, because some people might have some Philippine heritage in them and not. Are you asking every single person, like, is this term okay? Like, who decides? Who is Stanford, this bureaucracy at Stanford or UW to decide what language is appropriate or not? Like, and who it's harming? Like, they're making this assumption that it's harming this entire group of people, like there's some monolith, and that we as a bureaucracy, we know that this is hurting them, and so we're going to decide not to use it. Like, is it hurting them? Have they all been asked? Do they need to be asked? Do they care?
Has even one person of Philippine heritage had a problem with this? Even one? Oh, we don't know, do we?
We don't know. I mean, did they consult when writing this guide? I mean, I don't know. They don't say how they wrote the guide, but wow.
I mean, the mob bit. I know we're switching websites a bit, but the UW one, they didn't explain anything about why the connotation's there for mob, does it? So there's no showing the workings here, is there?
Well, let me see. I think that there was a hyperlink, so let's see if I can follow it and we'll find out.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Jody, what you're saying, oh, there has been a critical error on this website. So I guess the hyperlink goes to nothing. So just believe us that it is racist.
Are you talking about the Stanford one?
No, the University of Washington one, where they talk about mobs being racialized language. But one of the other things that I noticed, it goes to what you were saying, Jody. Some of the reason why some terms are problematic is cultural appropriation. But whose culture? And if we're supposed to be promoting so much diversity, who's to say that the person using it isn't linked to the culture that you're accusing them of appropriating? And so what is the presumed, are we presumed to have an absence of culture here? That we're supposed to just avoid anything that could hearken to cultural traditions of any society ever? And it feels like that's what we're doing. We're sterilizing language and removing anything that has historical context or value.
Yes, yeah. I agree. We're sterilizing it. We're also making it really hard to just have a normal conversation with each other. Mm-hmm. Because we're so afraid we're going to say the wrong thing or something might be deemed offensive.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're inhibiting language in this manner, you actually are inhibiting thought, because it becomes such that there's certain words that you can't even think lest you accidentally say them out loud and find yourself in trouble. So if somebody was explaining something to you and you suddenly got it, it's very normal to say, oh, I see. Well, now you can't say that. So that slows up your thinking process and you feel self-conscious in front of the person. And if you feel self-conscious, you feel disconnected from the person. So it's breaking down human connection. And I imagine they want you to say something instead like, oh, I understand. Well, how's saying you understand not ableist towards intellectually disabled people who might have difficulty understanding certain things? You just get to the point where there's nothing you can say that's safe.
Right. Or people that can't stand. Right, they're in a wheelchair. People that are under, they're shorter, so they're under. Like, you can really go to town with all this.
Yes,
it's so true. You can endlessly look for problems. I mean, the potential for parody is fantastic, but the problem is that as soon as you turn it into parody, they're going to turn it into reality because it's that close. It's like, what is real here?
Yep. How about some other ones? Some other good ones here.
Do you have the Stanford list up?
I have the Stanford one, yeah. So I have let's do some gender, but they have theirs categorized by, gender-based colonialism. So let's see. We have balls to the wall. You know that saying? What is that saying? It's like balls to the wall, like I'm gonna go for it.
Going all in, yeah.
Yeah,
like tilt.
Right. Yeah. So now consider instead using accelerate efforts. That's not poetic. Balls to the wall, like gets the job done. It's kind of like expletives, like fuck, like it's a phrase that like balls to the wall. It's like it's not just like what it's saying, it's poetic. You have an image and it rhymes, and it's just like, oh, it's the way the words sound together. Accelerate efforts.
It sounds like a computer.
No, yeah. Accelerate efforts.
Poetry and destroy good writing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yes. So instead, the context is the reason we're not to use balls to the wall. Can we guess?
It's gendered language.
Yeah.
It's gendered language, and it attributes personality traits to anatomy.
Mm.
Isn't that what gender ideology does? Like,
Yeah.
I like to play. I am a girl of 3 years old, and I like to play with trucks. Ooh, you might be a boy. Yeah. Isn't that attributing personality trait? Like, well, maybe not to anatomy. Yeah, it is, because so therefore you need to change your anatomy.
Yeah.
Match with your personality traits. That feels like.
Oh, that feels like a contradiction.
That's interesting.
That's
gender stereotyping, which is what the gender ideology does quite a bit of, gender stereotyping.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. We also have there's a lot of balls stuff in here, a lot of balls, like ballsy, have the balls to. He, the
word he.
Yeah, he as a. You should instead use the person's name or they. You're not referred to somebody as he.
Oh, I see. They have she on there too.
Yeah, and they have she. David, we're not going to refer to you as he. We're going to use they. Unless you know the person. Unless you know the person you're addressing uses he as their pronoun, it is better to use they or ask the person which pronouns they use. Well, look, I object to somebody assuming my pronoun and using they. Okay, that's also contradictory. We're not supposed to use somebody's pronouns. Well, isn't they a pronoun? Mm-hmm. So if you're using it, you're assuming that they're they. Like, isn't they a pronoun for non-binary people?
If you said they, would someone go, yeah, I am looking a bit masculine today, or something like that? Or you would know, would they automatically make them go, oh, I look a bit, what's the word? Non-gendered today, or something.
Androgynous.
It's just another androgynous, that's the word, thank you.
That goes with this obsession that also, again, you're causing harm if you misgender somebody, even by accident, they're going to be harmed. I was just in New York City, wearing my classic outfit, and this guy, I was in a bodega, and the guy was like, is that it, sir? Like, I had a coffee. Is that all you're having, sir? And then I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, no problem. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, that's not about me. Like, somebody mistook my gender. Like, it's not a big deal. And then I know what the argument is. The argument on the other side is, oh, well, but you have the privilege of being cis, so therefore it's not as offensive to you if somebody misgenders you. There are lots of trans people who don't care, and I've spoken to them, so I know if somebody misgenders them, they're just happy to have transition. Like, transition has helped them, and they're not concerned about what other people are thinking. That's I could go on. I don't want to dominate. Sorry.
No, that's yeah. There's a lot to talk about there. I know this is crazy. Well, crazy is probably one of the words. Let's see.
Yeah, I think crazy is.
Sure.
I also saw a phrase that was "hold down the fort."
What's wrong with that one?
So "hold down the fort." Apparently, this phrase stems from settlers and soldiers resisting savages when on the warpath. Just because of the use of the word fort. It's just because it's got fort in it.
So it's offensive to indigenous people.
Because apparently we'd only use that when we were destroying the lives of indigenous savages or something. Not when there was, castles in England and the French came over or anything like that. That wasn't it.
Well, they're actively, these language guides are, I don't know if it's purposely attempting to rewrite the meanings of these words.
Yes.
Right? So that
liberate.
Like, erase this truly is was it Orwellian, like
the
original meaning and instead attach this new woke lens to these words and make them bad.
Well, it seems like it, and some of it is so quibbly, like this one, abusive relationship, changed to consider using instead relationship with an abusive person. The reason is the relationship doesn't commit abuse, a person does. And so it's important to make that fact clear. And at the point where you're having to interrogate every single thing you say, like how many, just in a 2-minute dialogue, how many things could you say that you could rethink and maybe phrase differently? It completely stunts the ability to communicate. And beating a dead horse, you can't say that because it's normalizing violence against animals.
So I guess you can't say kill 2 birds with 1 stone anymore.
I think that's actually here. Yes, it normalizes violence against animals.
Well done, Jen. You got one that you didn't even know was on there.
I just figured, but you can see how inhibiting this is socially. And I know people who have told me that at work now, when they're in these woke environments with language guides or critical race theory embedded in the environment, that they're now just staying in their office with the door closed and avoiding conversations with their colleagues because they are so afraid of saying something wrong. And it could be as innocent as talking about a situation and saying, oh, well, it's not really black or white. And then, oh my gosh, I just made a racial reference. Mm-hmm. People are really frightened by this.
Yeah, and there's a ton of those, the black and white. There's like a whole section just on those 2 words and excising those from any discussion for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
The term ghetto really bothers me too. I've always used the word ghetto, like student. I lived in a student ghetto. We have the ghettos during the Holocaust. They're claiming this term indicates any socially segregated non-white neighborhood. That's not true. That's not what ghetto means. We tend to associate it with Black neighborhoods, but
didn't it start out as a Jewish?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like that's and it's accurate. A ghetto is like a little homogenous. I don't know where it came from, but these are PhDs who are creating these things.
Well, and here's long time no see is bad because it says the phrase was originally used to mock indigenous peoples and Chinese who spoke pidgin English. And I don't know about y'all, but I have used that phrase my whole life and I've never once had that connotation in mind. And so it's this like, can we go deep into the etymology and find something that we are troubled by?
Right. As if language doesn't evolve, as if we don't move out of these things and language changes meaning, right? I mean, that should be the social constructivist kind of viewpoint, surely, but no, we're going to find something problematic about it because then we can show we've done the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that this has become the work instead of actively doing work. That it's become an exercise in intellectual discourse and controlling discourse instead of actually helping struggling communities. Right? Or people that are struggling who may be of any race, or actively trying to address racial disparities or other disparities instead of quibbling about the words we're using. I don't think that actually even helps anybody. I don't think somebody who doesn't have enough food in their belly and can't heat their house is really concerned about what language is being used, or somebody who's mentally ill, really struggling with a hardcore mental illness and can't get the help they need. I don't know that they really care. Again, did we even ask them, or do they even give a shit what language some academics are using in the ivory tower somewhere? I just can't see people caring that much about it.
Well, it's a brilliant metaphor for bureaucracy in general, which is all about process instead of content. You know, it's like, we're going to talk about talking rather than really just talking. Let's just spend all of our time talking about talking. And like defining the like continuing to like lay out the rules of the game and never getting to the game.
Yeah, and forming committees and arguing, taking years, and yeah, totally. And there's something, this is a historical thing, like somebody, I think it was Catherine Liu is her name. She's at University of California, Irvine or Davis. Anyway, this is a thing, this creating a special language or creating a special discourse. And I think James Lindsay even said once that that's the whole purpose of going to college, is to learn how to speak in a certain way so that you can become part of the cultural elite. As distinguished from like I guess the financial elite, right? The cultural elites talk in a certain language so that they're somehow separate from the masses, and who don't understand the special language, and therefore that shows us that they're not part of this special elite club. And she said this happened before in France. I think the elites, I don't know much about it, so I can't speak to it, but the elites creating a special language so that we have markers and indicators of who's in the club, who's in the know and who isn't. And you can feel that too. I felt that at Smith. Like new terms would crop up. Like I remember the first time I heard BIPOC, I was like, what the hell is that, BIPOC? Like, imagine hearing that for the first time. Like, I didn't even know what it was. I kind of thought maybe it was an acronym, but nor did I feel comfortable asking. And that's the point. I felt like, oh, geez, because I'm supposed to know what it is. And if I don't, that might mean I'm like
not part of the club.
Out. Yeah. And also that I'm somehow guilty of not being part of the club, that I'm guilty of being racist for not understanding or knowing what that is. And that's how this works, I think. And it makes it very hard to argue against a movement or an ideology which has its own special language, and you need to know the language to even be able to counter it. If you don't even understand the language they're using, it's very hard to make a stand against it.
Jen, you look really thoughtful, like you're chewing on something.
You know, I read this article. I wish I could remember the name of it and the author, because it was so interesting. And I read this must have been almost 10 years ago. And this guy was writing about how he said, basically like cultural elites, financial elites create all of these social rules and then impose them downwards, you know, impose them on the working class, knowing full well that it is absolutely impossible for them, because they're not in that environment, to keep up with it. So they're always going to be falling short in terms of that. And it becomes this sort of way of, like you were saying, Jody, sort of distinguishing them from this elite and making them look sort of like, you know, rubes, making them ignorant because they're not in the know of this ever-changing revolving door of phrases and words that are acceptable.
It's a way to maintain power, and it's a false way, I think, and an ineffective way, because as a student of culture, my take on culture is that it's usually, and language, it's usually bottoms up. It's like, you know, if you think about slang and how language evolves, it's really a street kind of thing. It doesn't, I mean, we can argue like this woke stuff came from the academy, but it's not natural. If it's not natural, then it's probably not going to work. Like if you have to impose it and you have punishment if you don't do X, Y, and Z, it's language is it's like a living, breathing thing on its own, and something that happens organically and naturally. And if you have to force it, it's usually not going to take. That's not how language or culture works. It's not a top-down endeavor. Like even if you think of fashion, if you think of music and art, like these are usually things that come from, you know, the people, the masses, not the cultural elites. And I think it's just them trying to control because they can't ultimately.
But is that still the case, or do we now have culture by committee? Because it seems like in our current world where everybody's so plugged into screens and we've got so much programming going on, we really do have quite, I mean, there's,
Yeah.
I never thought I would live in a world where we have a career called influencer, but we do,
Yeah.
you know? And so is it still that way, or have we morphed into something different?
Well, I worry about that too, Leslie. I worry about the outsourcing of culture to third parties, such as the outsourcing of friendship to Facebook, the outsourcing of communicating to third-party chat apps, even like gossip. Gossip is a very important part of culture, and now, like, what are people saying on Nextdoor? That seems to be the new way to gossip. Like, I saw so and so, I saw a bear, I saw that concerns me. But I have to believe that people need culture. That doesn't feel like real. If culture serves a purpose, which I believe is to mediate our darker animal impulses so that we can live in civilization with each other, then we need culture in order to have a somewhat harmonious, if not perfect, somewhat harmonious civilization. If culture is failing to work, if it becomes this automated technocratic thing, then I believe it is no longer going to serve the purpose that we need as human beings to live together somewhat harmoniously, and that it will lead to a decay and a regression to the point where we are becoming violent with each other. Culture has a purpose, and it cannot be outsourced or mediated. It doesn't work anymore in the way that it's supposed to. That's my opinion.
Well, and that seems to be in keeping with what we're seeing with this increasing sterilization and dehumanization of the language. As we get to this point where we're not able to talk about, like, we're not able to say, what was the example in there? Chairwoman or chairman, we have to say chairperson. We're supposed to degender everything. We take mother away and we just parent.
Caretaker, even parent is problematic. It's now caretaker because not everybody who raises a child is actually their parent.
That's true.
And caretaker is so much less personal than parent, so much less personal than mother or father. So part of it seems to me too to be sort of an effort to make things less personal, less intimate, less real.
It's hard not to believe this isn't like a focused attempt at dividing us. When you think about the depersonalization, the loss of the word mother, and that you moving to vagina haver or uterus haver, to like reducing us to our parts, making us more mechanistic and machine-like. And then you think about artificial wombs, that whole movement of creating wombs that can carry babies without any human at all carrying the baby. And then how much is lost there from the infant, like not having any connection to or any bond to the mother at all. It's hard not to believe this isn't all. The more you think about this, the more it feels like a focused attempt, and from all angles.
Like a transhumanist.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you.
Yeah.
Yes. Transhumanist. Yes.
Yeah. You know, and speaking of words, you know, so we've got the list of words that are problematic and we shouldn't use. And this seems like you could endlessly add to this list. But I found NPR is promoting certain words now. We're supposed to expect to see these words more in 2023. So it's here's the language not to use, and here's the language we want you to start using. And I just found this last night. One buzzword concept is elite directed growth. So this is like your bit on that you were just talking about with where does culture come from? Does it come from the people, or does it come from something top down? So elite directed growth is one of the words they're wanting to promote. Solotalgia is another one. And this is a neologism that is a combination of the word for comfort and the word for pain. And it is a specific kind of existential distress caused by environmental change. And so this ties into the climate change agenda. So we're going to see people now, or I guess we can maybe expect, if these are the thought leaders, that we're going to start seeing this peppered throughout, or they'd like to promote this kind of language. And there were like 0-dose children, which is like now this big problem is people who don't have their children vaccinated. So now we're supposed to see these as like these little disease spreaders, these 0-dose people.
And lacking zero
Yes.
dose.
Yeah, it's a reframe of all of these concepts and a continued focus on the same topics that you know, as we see, the elite driven, right? The top down, what are we supposed to be talking about? And how are we supposed to be talking about it? So
there is, I mean, it's nice when something like, was it James Lindsay came with Okay Groomer, or let's go Brandon?
Yeah,
those are Let's Go Brandon. I mean, that it was so organic, and it actually became very, very powerful, didn't it? I mean, even didn't the Biden administration try to ban it or tamp it down, or some social media, I can't remember what, but it became an actual threat. So I can see why there would be a movement to try to control language, because we see how powerful it is. So, and nobody can really, I mean, some people push the word, vaccine free to describe, like, instead of unvaccinated, vaccine free. It seems more, or child free. That's another one. But again, like it doesn't quite take. It's something that has to happen kind of organically. Like people will like coin a term, like they'll be writing an essay and they'll just like come up with their own word for something, and then somehow, instead of like trying to push it, and then somehow if it's good and it works, it takes somehow. There's no way to force terms. But anyway, my point is, I can see why language is important, because it's not something that can really be controlled, and yet we have an establishment or central authorities trying to control it.
And then people becoming scared of their own shadow when they speak.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that people give into it. People, I think, but I can see why people give into it, right? You might lose your job if you don't.
I think there's a phenomenon where even if you're not trying to give into it, it still impacts you, because I mean, I'm a public whistleblower, and I now find myself unusually self-conscious in social situations, just because it's in my head, even though I disagree with all of this, and I think it's absolutely foolish. I do have this sense of, oh, I'm not sure who I'm talking to, and if they've bought into all of this, and I could say something completely innocent, and then I have this offended person. Not that I think they can do anything to me, but it's just this feeling of, now I'm going to suddenly have a very unpleasant social interaction for no particular reason whatsoever. It's odd. I definitely have this sense now when I'm speaking to other people that I didn't have before.
Well, and it's like you're writing the line between self-censorship and diplomacy. What is polite conversation? And
well, that they say you never at a dinner party never talk about religion or politics. That saying.
Or money.
Or money, right? Well, unless you live in New York, it's all money and real estate. But if everything is politicized, everything, including the words we use, then it makes it hard to talk about anything at all, right? Everything's political.
That's right.
Even desire, as we discussed last week. Erotic.
I know we need to wrap up, but I wanted to read some of the chat comments first. We had nice engagement there. CNY Photo Video says gender ideology and vaccine ideology seem to be in the same boat. And that was a comment that came through earlier when we were talking about that. And yeah, the link there. like to hear more about CNYs.
It's called the USS Pfizer, that boat.
That boat. Yeah, that's true. It's a Firma boat.
Firma boat.
William Joyner says, love what you guys are doing. Sorry it's born out of the crap of the world. Yeah. Jim Moses says, the issues that happen in academics are surreal to anyone not of that world. These are earmarks of a class system. Woke culture is of academics, a spawn of that world. Those on the outside of that world have no idea what is happening and find it utterly bizarre, which it objectively is. So I'm just running through and grabbing a couple of comments because there's a bunch here. CNY photo video says, I am a quadriplegic from a spinal cord injury, and I don't care one bit about ableism. To me, it is silly. Oh, I am sorry to hear about that injury, CNY. I'm sure that's been profoundly impacting your life. And thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, like the whole ableism thing, it's this literal interpretation of language. And it's just getting hung up on literal interpretation. And that's the part of it that is silly. I mean, you wouldn't want to say things that were intentionally offensive to someone if you were aware of
we know what that is. Like,
yeah.
it's so condescending.
Yeah.
People who are disabled, like, oh, you can't handle it. Like you're not only are you in a wheelchair, but oh, you're so sensitive. We have to be very careful around you what we say. It's like, it's so condescending and insulting.
I was just thinking that it takes away any sense that they might have any mental fortitude as well. It's just like, oh, we can't do that. It's like, yeah, you're taking that from them as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's like a babying. All right. Gen X-Ray says all issues and actions have been made into a civil war at a time of great confusion, but be aware of the history of right-wing motivation to attack academia as well. Action, reaction, extreme reactions. Let's see, running through. Crystal Nicole says, yay, I caught you guys live. I love you all so much, and I'm happy you're speaking up about this. I'm a teacher and have been shocked at the way things have been going. Thank you, Crystal. I'm glad you're here in the chat. And yeah, teachers have it hard right now because that's a really, it seems like quite a bubble.
Yeah, and shout out to our sister organization, Terra Firma, who's running teacher groups. So yeah, I'll try to post something on Locals about that.
Yeah, yeah. And then if you want to send me a link, if they have a link that I can put in the comments, I could do that too.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be good.
If they want the promotion. And Neil Barnes says the basis for this is politics losing its necessity in society, and therefore everything becomes political as power is lost. Yeah, thanks, Neil. That's a good point. Thank you to everybody who has joined us live. This time I actually remembered to press record, so I'll upload this separately as a video, not just the live stream, but it's nice to have all of you here. And are there any final thoughts, you guys?
Yeah, try not to get, I know about the self-consciousness and stuff, but remember, just, if you're certain, if you know that this shit is BS, just keep reminding yourself of that. Like, you're okay. You're not racist. You're not harming people by speaking naturally.
Yeah,
just want to say that.
I think we should also try to like disincentivize those people that kind of call things out sometimes just in throwaway conversations. Like I had a throwaway conversation the other day. I was trying to remember what the term was for sort of an Irish folk song. I think I called it a sea shanty. And because I was with an Irish person, somebody else in the group went, "Is that racist?" And even looked at her and she went, I don't care. And then it was like, and I felt like going, you know what? You should feel a little bit embarrassed now that you're throwing that word around in this social situation. And you don't realize that when you do that, you make everyone feel a little bit rigid, you know?
Right.
You make everyone feel a little bit on edge. Why has that been brought up? So I don't know. Maybe there's a way in which we could also just make those people feel a little bit accountable, because he probably didn't get any sense of responsibility from that. He thought, maybe I did a good thing there, just questioning that.
I think we should make jokes about it. That's how to relieve. That's what culture does. Yeah. We make comedy out of it to relieve the pressure about, like, okay, if we can laugh about it, then it becomes less
I think that's brilliant. Yeah, there's some great satire out there. Thinking to Keep Fears is one. But I know Jennifer has to go. She's got her group.
Yeah, Jennifer has a group right now, everybody.
Yeah. Well, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for everybody being there. All right. Bye.